I had been listening to the Vael for 4 hours before I understood what their silences meant. My name is Renata Voss, and on the day humanity made its first real contact with the Vael Ascendancy, I was sitting at a sensor console in the dark, inside a wrecked fleet debris field, watching a screen full of ships that did not know I existed. The debris field had been somebody's war once. Hulls split open and tumbling end over end, slow as held breath, scorched along their spines where something had cut them apart decades before we ever arrived. The Callaway's Reach sat among that wreckage with every active system bled down to a whisper, running cold and dark and silent, indistinguishable on Vael sensor from one more dead ship among 1,000 dead ships. We had picked that grave on purpose. Nothing reads a heavy carrier as a heavy carrier when it is sitting still in a field of identical scrap, holding its breath, waiting. 300 kilometers off our bow, the actual conversation was happening. The Whitfield, a single unarmed scout no bigger than a shuttle bay, sat alone in open space, facing 11 Vael warships arranged in a loose crescent, their running lights cold blue against the dark. Commander Adiza Dawu was aboard that scout with 2 attaches and no weapons worth a name, and she had been talking to the Vael fleet commander for 4 hours through a translator matrix, still learning the shape of his language. I watched her feed on my secondary display. I watched the Vael ships on the primary. My job was to read what they could not say out loud. Engine signatures spiking when they thought they had the advantage, targeting arrays, sweeping the Whitfield with the lazy confidence of something that has already decided how a fight will end. I had flagged 41 separate moments where the Vael formation tightened like a hand closing, and 41 times the Whitfield had simply kept talking, kept holding still, kept giving them nothing to react to. The Vael fleet commander's name, as near as our matrix could render it, was Hres Columnar Vael Thresh. He spoke with the unhurried patience of someone who had done this before. I learned, listening to 4 hours of his translated words, that the Vael had made contact with 11 other species in the last 3 centuries, and in every case the pattern had been the same. An unescorted vessel sent forward to test temperament, an ultimatum issued once weakness was confirmed, and either capitulation or a war so brief it barely earned a name. He was not being cruel. He genuinely believed he was being merciful, giving humanity the chance to surrender its border systems before he had to take them. He believed it because Adiz had let him believe it. She had answered every question with calm, with patience, with something that could be mistaken for an absence of options. She had not once mentioned that anything stood behind her. At hour 4, Hres Columnar Vael Thresh stopped asking questions. Your single vessel is not authorized to negotiate borders, his translated voice said, flattened by the matrix into something almost gentle. I extend the Ascendancy's terms one final time. Withdraw from the contested systems within 1 rotation, or we will board your vessel and extract the compliance your government has failed to offer. I watched 11 Vael ships begin a slow, deliberate rotation, bringing broadside batteries to bear on a scout with no shields worth mentioning. On my board, I watched something I'd been told to expect and still felt land in my chest like a dropped weight. The order, finally, routed through Adiz's channel and into ours. Callaway's Reach. Break stealth. Captain Alconco Reyes did not raise his voice. He never did. Helm, bring up the drive. Weapons, full active on my mark. Comms, he found me without looking, the way he always did. Open the channel the moment we're visible. I want them to hear us before they finish deciding what they're looking at. I had run this sequence in simulation 11 times. I had never run it with my hands shaking, and they were shaking now, not from fear exactly, from the particular weight of being the one who flips the switch that changes how an entire species understands its place in the galaxy. The Callaway's Reach came up out of stealth the way a held breath finally leaves a chest, all at once, with nothing gradual about it. One moment, we were 300 kilometers of dead scrap metal. The next, every running light on a kilometer 8 carrier hull blazed on simultaneously. Point defense turrets rotated out of their housings in a wave that swept the whole length of the ship, and the drive core that had been cold for 4 hours lit up so bright that for half a second our own sensors washed out from bloom. On the Vael tactical display, I watched 11 warships worth of targeting lock scatter and reform in real time. Their formation, which had held steady and confident for 4 hours, broke apart like a closed hand opening too fast to control. 3 ships began emergency burns to put distance between themselves and a target their own sensors had just told them was 40 times the mass they'd assumed they were dealing with. The flagship's weapons, already trained on the Whitfield, hung there a full 2 seconds, caught between the order already given and the new reality nobody had briefed them for. I opened the channel exactly as ordered, the instant we were visible before they could finish deciding what to do with the fear. Vael Fleet, this is Lieutenant Renata Voss, Communications, Terran Heavy Carrier Callaway's Reach. We have been in this debris field for the duration of your conversation with Commander Itawu. We are not the negotiation. We are what the negotiation was protecting you from having to meet. Silence on their end. Not the patient, measured silence Hres columnar Vael Thresh had used for 4 hours like a tool, but a different kind. The kind that comes from a species recalculating everything it believed about a threat it thought it already understood. You showed restraint, I said, and Akonkor let me say it because we had agreed days ago that this part needed a human voice and not a captain's command voice. 4 hours of restraint, while you tested how far it would bend. It bent because that was the offer we chose to make you. It was never the only thing we had to offer. The Vael flagship's weapons came off the Whitfield. Not retreating, I want to be precise about that, because precision was the entire point of the day, but lowering the way a hand lowers when it finally understands the thing in front of it is not the thing it was prepared to fight. Crest columnar Vael Thresh's voice came back through the matrix changed, the patience in it gone thin and careful. You held a vessel of this mass silent and undetected for 4 hours, 300 kilometers from my fleet, and said nothing. We did, I said. We wanted to see what you'd do with an unescorted scout before you ever had to find out what we'd do with a carrier. There was no order given to fire on either side. There was no order given for anything for nearly a full minute, while 11 Vael warships sat motionless against the black and the wreckage around us drifted on, indifferent, the way old ruins always do. Then Hres columnar Vael Thresh did something his species had apparently not done in 3 centuries of first contacts. He withdrew the ultimatum and asked, instead, for terms. The treaty that came out of that hour was not generous, and it was not humiliating. It was a border drawn in good faith between 2 powers who had each just learned something true about the other. The Vael Ascendancy had built 300 years of expansion on the assumption that a quiet species was a weak one. We had spent 4 hours proving that assumption wrong, without firing a single round, and somehow that landed harder on them than a battle would have. I have told this story exactly once before tonight, to my mother, who asked me what it felt like to watch a war almost happen and then not happen at all. I told her it felt like holding still at the edge of something enormous, knowing the only reason it didn't go over was that we'd chosen, deliberately, not to let it. That choice is the part nobody back home understands when they imagine first contact. They picture the guns, the decloak, the moment the enemy sees what you are. They never picture the 4 hours before it, the silence we kept on purpose, the restraint that cost us more than the reveal ever did. I still run that sequence sometimes, alone on a quiet watch, just to remember the exact half-second the Vael formation realized what had been sitting in the dark with them the whole time. Not triumph, not relief, just the settling, slow and certain, of a fact that would not need repeating. We had been merciful first and capable always, and they would not mistake the order of those 2 things again.